My name is David Harrison, and at 60 years old, I thought I had a family that loved me. I had a good life, steady work, a house I was proud of, and a son I thought the world of. Andrew was my only child, and he was my pride and joy. I raised him on my own for most of his life after his mother passed away, and we were close, closer than I had ever been with my own father. I did everything I could to make sure Andrew had everything he needed, emotionally and financially. And yet, in one swift moment, everything I thought I knew about my family was turned upside down. It started small, like most things do when change is creeping in unnoticed. At first, I thought Andrew was just busy. He was married to Rachel now, and they had their own life, their own responsibilities. I wasn't a young man anymore, and I didn't want to be a burden, so I tried to stay out of their way. I would call once a week to check in, maybe drop by on Sundays for dinner. But over time, the calls became fewer. He was less and less available, and when I did see him, he seemed distracted, distant. I started to feel like I was an inconvenience, but I brushed it off. After all, he was a father now, and I knew how difficult that could be. Rachel, his wife, was wonderful when they first got together. I thought the world of her. But as the months passed, I noticed a subtle shift in her too. She started making little comments about me. "Dad, you're getting older, maybe you shouldn't be out working in the yard so much." Or, "It's probably time to think about slowing down, don't you think?" At first, it felt like concern. But over time, those comments started to feel more like criticism. And it wasn't just the comments, Rachel seemed to be subtly pushing Andrew away from me. But I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I was probably overthinking things. I kept telling myself that I just needed to be patient. My son had his own life now. And if he was distant, it wasn't because of anything I'd done. At least, that's what I kept telling myself. Then came that day. I remember it like it was yesterday. I had planned to stop by Andrew and Rachel's house after work to spend some time with the kids. I hadn't seen them in a while, and I was looking forward to playing with my grandkids, hearing their laughter, and just feeling like part of the family again. When I knocked on the door, it was Rachel who opened it. She looked surprised to see me. "Oh, hi, David," she said, a little too cheerfully. "What's going on?" "I thought I'd stop by and see the kids," I said, smiling. "Maybe we could play a game or something." Rachel hesitated for a moment, her smile fading just slightly. "Actually, Andrew isn't here right now. He's out with some friends. But you're welcome to come in." I nodded and stepped inside. The house was quieter than usual. No children running around. No sounds of life, really. Just silence, the kind of silence that fills the spaces between people who no longer know how to talk to each other. I sat down in the living room, and Rachel joined me on the couch. We exchanged small talk for a few minutes, but something was off. I could feel it in my bones, that familiar, uncomfortable feeling that something wasn't right. After a while, Andrew walked in. I could tell immediately that he wasn't happy to see me. His expression was distant, almost cold. I tried to brush it off, but it was impossible to ignore. "Hey, Dad," he said, his voice flat. "What's going on?" "I came by to see the kids," I said, trying to keep things light. "Thought we could hang out for a bit." Andrew nodded, but there was no warmth in his eyes. "Yeah, about that." And that was when it happened. That was when my world shattered. "Dad," he said, his voice tight, "I need you to listen to me. Rachel and I have talked about this, and we both agree it's time for you to move out. You can't stay here anymore." I felt the blood drain from my face. "What are you talking about?" I stammered. "Where am I supposed to go?" Andrew's gaze shifted uncomfortably, and Rachel's eyes met mine with an almost apologetic look. "It's just not working, Dad," Andrew said. "We've tried, but you're not the father you used to be. You're just not a part of this family anymore. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. I was in a daze, staring at my son, the son I had loved, raised, sacrificed for, telling me that I wasn't his father anymore. "I'm sorry, Dad," Andrew continued. "It's just how it is. We've made our decision. You're not welcome here anymore." My whole world came crashing down around me, and in that moment, I didn't know who I was anymore. I wasn't a father. I wasn't a grandfather. I was nothing. I tried to speak, to say something, but my voice failed me. There was nothing left to say. I stood up and left, walking out of the house that had been my home for so many years, the place where I thought I had a family. But now, it was just a house. That day, my son, my flesh and blood, told me that I wasn't his father anymore. After Andrew threw me out of his life, I was left standing in the empty spaces of my own existence, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong. The drive home that day was the longest of my life. I kept my eyes on the road, but my mind was elsewhere, trapped in the chaos of my own thoughts. I couldn't stop thinking about the words Andrew had said, his cold, emotionless tone as he told me that I wasn't his father anymore. The words echoed in my mind like a drumbeat I couldn't escape. I wasn't prepared for it. Not in the slightest. I had never imagined a world in which my own son would say something like that to me. Sure, we had disagreements before. But this? This was a betrayal of the deepest kind. How could he just shut me out like that? What had happened between us? I had raised him, loved him, and given everything I had to provide for him. And yet, it felt like none of that mattered anymore. When I got home, the silence in my house felt oppressive, like a heavy blanket suffocating me. There were no grandkids' toys scattered around, no sounds of my wife preparing dinner in the kitchen. It was just me, alone with my thoughts, trying to piece together what had gone wrong. I sat in the living room, staring out the window at the familiar view. The same street, the same trees, the same house I had built with my own hands. But everything looked different now. It felt like a stranger's house. I had never felt more alone. I thought about calling my brother, maybe a few close friends, but I couldn't bring myself to do it. What would I say? How could I explain something like this? How could I put into words the way my son had so callously removed me from his life? I couldn't. I couldn't even explain it to myself. My thoughts kept circling back to Rachel. I knew she had been a part of this, she had been the one whispering in Andrew's ear, I was sure of it. She had always been polite to me, but I had sensed from the beginning that there was something off about her. She didn't want me around. I could feel it in the way she spoke to me, in the way she would subtly push me out of conversations, in the way she would criticize me when I tried to help. It wasn't just that, though. It was the way she had manipulated Andrew, turning him against me, making him believe that I wasn't fit to be in his life anymore. She had created a wedge between us, and now I was paying the price. But even with all of that, I couldn't help but wonder if I had played a part in this. Maybe I hadn't been the father I should have been. Maybe I hadn't been there enough for Andrew as he grew up. I had worked hard, tried to provide for him, but was that enough? Was I too focused on making money, on creating a comfortable life, and not focused enough on being the father he needed? I ran my hands through my hair, feeling the weight of it all. The guilt. The confusion. The pain. The next few days were a blur. I tried to reach out to Andrew, of course. I left him voicemails, sent messages, but received nothing in return. I even tried calling Rachel, but she wouldn't answer either. It was like I didn't exist anymore. And the worst part? I didn't know how to fix it. I spent my days at home, cleaning, keeping myself busy with mundane tasks, trying to distract myself from the hurt. But no matter how hard I tried, the pain of being cut off from my son, from my family, lingered like an open wound. I couldn't escape it. I knew I couldn't just sit around forever. I had to do something. But what? What could I do to make Andrew understand? How could I show him that I was still his father, that I still cared for him? How could I make him see that I wasn't some distant, irrelevant figure in his life? I didn't have the answers, but I knew one thing: I couldn't give up on him. One night, after another long, silent day, I decided to take a walk. I needed to clear my head, to get some air, to think. As I walked down the quiet street, my thoughts kept circling back to Andrew, to the love I had for him, to the pain of being shut out. How could I fix this? And then, just as I was turning back toward home, I saw something that made my heart stop: Andrew and Rachel's car, parked down the street. It wasn't unusual to see them around, but the sight of their car in the dark, parked near the house, felt like fate. I stood there for a long time, debating what to do. Should I confront them? Should I knock on the door, demand an explanation for what had happened? But before I could make up my mind, I saw the lights flicker on in their living room window. I knew they were inside. I stood frozen for a moment, my heart racing, my hands trembling at my sides. It wasn't just the car. It was the fact that they were so close, yet so far away. It was the fact that I had once been a part of their lives, and now, I was nothing but a stranger on the outside looking in. I walked away. I couldn't do it. Not yet. The next morning, I made the decision to leave the house. I packed a few bags, took what little I could carry, and checked into a small motel on the outskirts of town. I couldn't stay there, not while I was still in this limbo. I needed space to think. I needed time to figure out what came next. But even then, the pain was relentless. I wasn't sure what I was going to do, but I knew that I couldn't give up. Days turned into weeks, and the silence became unbearable. I couldn't escape the loneliness that consumed me, the nagging feeling that somehow, some way, I had failed my son. I woke up every morning in the same sterile motel room, feeling like I was a million miles away from the life I had known. I wasn't even sure what I was doing there anymore. I had left my house, left everything behind, thinking that the space would help me clear my mind, give me some time to think. But all it did was amplify the emptiness inside me. Every phone call I made to Andrew went unanswered. Every message I left for Rachel was ignored. I had no idea what to do anymore. The void they had left behind was growing by the day, filling up every corner of my life with the kind of silence that made everything feel pointless. I wasn't even sure if I was still their father anymore. I wasn't sure if I still had a place in their world. I spent my days pacing around the motel room, watching the hours slip away. Sometimes, I'd drive around town, past the familiar streets, past Andrew and Rachel's house. I could still remember the times I'd drive up to their driveway, pull in with a smile, and be greeted by the laughter of my grandkids and the warm embrace of my son. I could almost feel it now, like a phantom, a memory that taunted me as I passed by. But I didn't stop. I couldn't bring myself to face them, not yet. But I needed to see them. I needed to know if there was any hope left, if there was any way I could fix what had been broken. I told myself I was going to be strong, that I wouldn't let this tear me apart. But every time I tried to be strong, every time I thought I had the courage to knock on their door and demand answers, I felt like a coward. I could still see Andrew's face when he told me I wasn't his father anymore. It was like I was standing in front of a stranger. The pain was so sharp, so raw, that I couldn't escape it. I was filled with a hollow kind of rage, but also a deep sadness. How had we gotten to this point? What had happened to the love I thought we shared? What had I done wrong? I thought about calling my own father, but the truth was, he wasn't really the kind of man who could help in a situation like this. He'd never been emotionally available, never the type to sit down and talk through problems. I loved him, but I knew he wouldn't understand. He had always been distant, too focused on his own life to notice when something was wrong in mine. So, I called my sister, Jane. She was always the one who seemed to understand me. We hadn't spoken much in the last few years, but I hoped she could offer some clarity. She answered on the second ring. David? It's been a while. How are you doing? I could hear the concern in her voice, but I wasn't sure how much I wanted to say. I don't know how to explain it, Jane. Everything's falling apart. What do you mean? What's going on? I took a deep breath and told her everything, about Andrew, about Rachel, about how they had cut me out of their lives. By the time I finished speaking, I could hear Jane quietly sobbing on the other end of the line. I can't believe it, she said, her voice breaking. You've always been there for him. You raised him. You gave everything, David. How could he do this? I don't know, I whispered. I don't know where I went wrong. I thought I was a good father. I thought he was the one person I could count on. And now, he's telling me I'm not even his father anymore. There was a long pause before Jane spoke again. David, listen to me. I know it doesn't feel like it now, but there has to be a way through this. Maybe Andrew's just confused, or maybe he's letting Rachel influence him more than he should. I don't know what's going on between them, but I do know this, you're still his father. Don't let him take that from you. I closed my eyes, fighting back tears. But what if he doesn't want me anymore? What if he's made up his mind? I don't believe that, Jane replied firmly. You need to give him time, but you also need to stand your ground. Don't let him think he can push you out of his life completely. But don't push too hard, either. If you love him, if you want to fix this, you have to be patient. I know it's hard, David, but don't give up on him just yet. Her words hung in the air for a while, and for the first time since that day, I felt a spark of hope. Jane was right. I couldn't give up. No matter how painful it was, no matter how much it hurt, I couldn't just let Andrew go. He was my son, and I was still his father. But that didn't make it any easier. The next few days were filled with quiet resolve. I spent my time trying to figure out what I could do next. Should I write a letter to Andrew? Should I send a message to Rachel? I didn't know. I didn't know how to reach them, how to make them see that I was still here, still fighting for my place in their lives. I decided to wait for a little while, but the silence was crushing. I couldn't stand the thought of losing them, of not being a part of their lives anymore. And then, one evening, I saw something that shook me to my core. I was sitting in the motel room, flipping through old photo albums, trying to remind myself of the good times, when I received a message from an unknown number. At first, I thought it was spam or a wrong number, but when I opened it, my heart dropped. It was from Andrew. The message was short, but it was enough to send my mind reeling. We need to talk. Can you come over tomorrow? We need to clear the air. I couldn't breathe for a moment. I stared at the screen, the weight of his words sinking in. After all this time, after the silence, he was reaching out. The question was, what would I do when I saw him again? The message from Andrew was a lifeline in a sea of uncertainty, but when the time came to meet him, I was filled with dread. I didn't know what I would find when I looked into his eyes again, or what kind of man he had become in the months we had been apart. The day of the meeting came faster than I expected. The hours leading up to it dragged on, but when the time finally arrived, I found myself standing in front of Andrew and Rachel's house once again, my heart pounding in my chest. The driveway was empty except for their car, and for a moment, I stood there, just staring at the house. It felt like the house had grown larger since the last time I'd been here, its walls somehow more imposing, as if it were a fortress. A fortress that had once been my home, but no longer felt like it. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and walked up to the door. My hand hovered over the doorknob, hesitating. What was I even expecting? Was Andrew going to apologize? Would he finally tell me why he'd turned on me, why he'd pushed me away? Or was this just a formality, a way to placate me so he could feel better about himself? I didn't know. But what I did know was that this meeting had the potential to either heal the rift between us or tear it open even wider. I knocked. It wasn't long before Andrew opened the door. He looked different. The man who had stood before me just a few weeks ago, angry and cold, was gone. In his place was a man who seemed tired, worn down. His eyes were puffy, as though he hadn't been sleeping well, and his shoulders were hunched, as if the weight of something heavy was pressing on him. He stepped aside to let me in. There was no warm greeting, no, "Come on in, Dad." Instead, it was just a simple gesture, a move that seemed devoid of emotion, yet still polite. "Thanks for coming," he said quietly, his voice lacking the sharpness it had held the last time we spoke. I stepped inside, and the tension in the air hit me immediately. Rachel was sitting on the couch, her eyes locked on the floor. She looked up when I entered, but it wasn't the usual warm greeting I had once gotten from her. She looked like she was waiting for something, maybe for me to speak, maybe for Andrew to speak, maybe for the storm to finally break. I sat down in the armchair across from them, my mind racing. My palms were clammy, and my throat was dry. There were so many things I wanted to say to Andrew. So many things I needed him to understand. But I wasn't sure where to start. "Dad," Andrew said, breaking the silence. "I don't really know how to begin this. I know I've hurt you, and I just want to apologize. I've been thinking about everything for a long time, and I've realized how wrong I was." I blinked, shocked by his words. An apology? It wasn't what I expected. In my mind, I had prepared myself for anger, for more blame, but this? This felt like the first crack in the wall he'd built between us. "I don't know how to make things right," he continued. "But I know I need to try. I can't keep going on like this." I swallowed hard. "What do you mean, Andrew? What's been going on? What's really been happening?" Rachel, who had been silent the entire time, looked up and met my gaze. Her eyes were filled with regret, but there was something else there too, something I couldn't quite place. "I'm sorry for the way things have gone, David," she said softly. "I never meant to come between you and your son. But I think we both lost our way. I think I encouraged Andrew to push you out, to make choices that weren't fair to you. I'm not proud of it." Her admission was like a punch to the gut. For the first time, I felt a flicker of understanding. I had always known Rachel had a certain influence over Andrew, but I had never realized how deep it went. I had always thought she was a caring wife, someone who wanted the best for Andrew and their family. But now, I could see that she had been part of the reason Andrew had cut me off in the first place. I don't know what to say to that," I said, my voice wavering. "Why would you do that? Why would you let your own fears drive a wedge between us?" Rachel looked down, unable to meet my gaze. "I guess I thought it would be easier. I didn't want you to be a burden, David. I thought if we could just distance ourselves from you, everything would be better. I didn't realize how much damage we were doing." Andrew looked over at Rachel, his face softening. "I got scared, Dad. Scared that I couldn't balance everything, being a father, being a husband, being the man I was supposed to be. I thought if I cut ties with you, I could start fresh. But it wasn't a fresh start. It was a mistake." I stared at him for a long moment, trying to absorb everything that had been said. "So, you just pushed me away? You couldn't talk to me? You couldn't tell me that you were struggling, that you needed help?" Andrew's face twisted with guilt. "I didn't know how, Dad. I didn't know how to ask you for help without feeling like I was weak, like I was failing as a man." I felt my chest tighten. I wanted to reach out, to comfort him, to tell him it was okay to make mistakes, that he didn't have to carry the weight of the world on his shoulders alone. But it wasn't that simple. I couldn't just forgive him that easily. "I'm not angry at you, Andrew," I said, my voice breaking. "I'm hurt. You don't even know how much it hurt to hear you tell me I wasn't your father anymore. I've loved you my whole life, and I've always been there for you. And to hear those words from you. It's something I can't just forget." Andrew's eyes filled with tears, and he looked away. "I know. I know, Dad. And I'll regret what I said for the rest of my life. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. But I need you to know how sorry I am." I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "I can't promise that everything will go back to the way it was, Andrew. But I'm willing to try. I want to be a part of your life again. I want to be your father again. But you need to let me in. You need to let me help." There was silence for a long moment, and then Andrew nodded, his voice barely a whisper. "I'll let you in, Dad. I promise. I'll do whatever it takes to fix this." It wasn't a perfect resolution. There were still so many things that needed to be said, so many wounds that needed to be healed. But in that moment, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, we could rebuild what had been broken. I left their house that evening with a strange mixture of emotions swirling in my chest. Hope, but also doubt. Andrew had apologized, and Rachel had finally admitted her role in pushing me away, but was that enough? Could an apology undo all the hurt, the years of silence, the moments I'd missed? Could I really go back to the father I had been before? The father who had been so easily discarded, told he wasn't needed anymore? I walked out into the night, feeling like I had taken a small step toward healing, but still unsure if the road ahead would lead to a place of true reconciliation. I needed time to process everything that had been said, to figure out if I could trust Andrew again, if I could trust myself not to get hurt again. I spent the next few days in a kind of daze. I tried to keep myself busy with small tasks, fixing up things around the house, tidying up, anything to fill the silence. But nothing felt quite right. The house seemed emptier than it ever had before. Without Andrew's laughter, without the hustle and bustle of his family, it felt like something vital had been removed from the space. I tried calling Andrew a few times, but each time, I hesitated. I didn't want to push him. I didn't want to make him feel like I was coming on too strong. He had said he was willing to try, but how long would it take? How long before I would know if he truly meant it? It was a strange kind of waiting. I was no longer the father in his life, not in the way I had been. I wasn't needed in their home, not in the same way I used to be. But I wanted to be a part of his life again. I wanted to be a part of my grandkids' lives. I wasn't sure how much of that was even possible anymore. One evening, a week after our conversation, I got a message from Andrew. It was short, but it was a start. "Dad, I've been thinking a lot about what we talked about. I want to try. I know it's not going to be easy, but I'm willing to start over, if you are. Let me know when you're free. I want to see you." I felt a weight lift from my shoulders as I read the message. For the first time in a long while, I felt a flicker of optimism. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. But I also knew that starting over wouldn't be easy. The scars of the past were still fresh. How could I ever forget the feeling of being cast aside, the words that had been said? How could Andrew forget the hurt he had caused me, the way he had so easily dismissed me as if I were nothing? But I also knew that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting. It was about healing, about moving forward, even when the past weighed heavy. And if Andrew was willing to try, then I had to be too. I sent him a message back, "I'm willing to try too, Andrew. Let's start fresh. Let me know when you're free." The next day, Andrew came by the house to pick me up. He looked different, softer, maybe even a little vulnerable. His eyes, which had once seemed so distant, now looked like they were searching for something, perhaps for forgiveness, perhaps for reassurance that we could truly fix this. "Thanks for agreeing to meet, Dad," he said, his voice quiet. "I know it's been hard. I don't expect you to just forgive me overnight, but I want to work on this. I'm not sure what working on this looks like, Andrew, I said, trying to sound calm. But I'm here. I'm willing to try. I think we both need time. He nodded. I know. I just want to make it right. I don't want to lose you, Dad. We didn't say much after that. I could see that Andrew was still struggling with his own emotions, trying to find the right words. But the silence between us didn't feel as heavy anymore. It felt like something was shifting, like we were both trying to understand each other in a way we hadn't before. We decided to go out for a coffee, something simple. And as we sat there, drinking our drinks in the quiet of the cafe, I realized something: this wasn't going to be easy. It wasn't going to be quick. But this was a start. It was a chance for us to find our way back to each other. I didn't know where it would lead, or how long it would take, but I knew that I wasn't going to give up on my son. I wasn't going to let him push me out of his life again. I had to believe that he was still the same person I had raised, that the love we shared could still be rebuilt. As we finished our coffee, Andrew looked at me and said, "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about not being the father I used to be. I'm sorry I pushed you away. You were always there for me, and I wasn't there for you when you needed me." His words weren't easy to hear. But they were honest. And for the first time in a long time, I saw the man I had raised, the son who had once been full of promise, the son I had loved. "I'm still here, Andrew," I said, my voice firm. "And I'm not going anywhere. But you need to understand that it's going to take time. We can't just fix everything in one conversation." "I know," he said softly, looking down at his hands. "I know. But I'm ready to try, if you are." The next few months were a mixture of small victories and setbacks. There were moments of connection, moments when I saw the old Andrew, the boy I had raised. And there were times when the silence between us felt just as heavy as it had before. But we kept trying. We kept talking. And with every conversation, with every small step forward, I felt like we were getting closer to something real. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't even easy. But it was something. And that was enough for now. The months after our first real conversation felt like small steps forward, but every now and then, the road would seem to stretch out before us, dark and uncertain. Andrew and I continued to meet, each time trying to bridge the gap that had existed between us. There were moments when I saw glimpses of the son I had raised, the young man full of promise and love. There were other times when he seemed distant, disconnected, as if he were still holding something back from me. I had my own fears too. I feared that no matter how hard we tried, things would never truly go back to what they once were. I feared that this fragile reconciliation might crumble at the slightest pressure. But despite the uncertainty, I tried to remain hopeful. I told myself that I couldn't give up on him, not again. Not after everything we had been through. It was during one of these quiet moments that everything began to unravel. I had invited Andrew over for dinner one evening. The kids were with Rachel's parents for the weekend, and it felt like the perfect time for us to have some uninterrupted time together. Rachel had agreed to give us space, which was a good sign. I had noticed that things were becoming a little more comfortable with her too, though there was still tension in the air whenever we interacted. But Andrew and I, we were talking more. We were taking baby steps toward rebuilding what we once had. But that evening, something was off. Andrew arrived late, his face clouded with something I couldn't quite place. He wasn't the usual Andrew I had seen over the past few months. There was an edge to him, a tension that I hadn't noticed before. I told myself it was just a bad day at work, something trivial. But as we sat down to eat, the words that came out of his mouth shocked me. "Dad," Andrew said, his voice tight, "I need to talk to you about something." I set my fork down, immediately sensing the seriousness in his tone. "What's going on, Andrew? You don't look so good." He stared at his plate for a moment, as if unsure how to continue. I could see him wrestling with something heavy. And then, finally, he spoke. "I've been thinking about everything, and I need to tell you the truth. About why things got so bad. About why I pushed you away." I felt my heart begin to race. I thought I knew what was going on. I thought I had it all figured out, the distance between us, the influence Rachel had, the pressures of his own life. But this was something different. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice low. "You've told me everything, Andrew. What else is there to say?" He looked at me, his eyes full of guilt and regret. "It's not just Rachel, Dad. It's not just that I was trying to be the man of the house. There's more. Something I've been hiding from you." My mind was spinning now. What could it be? Had there been something I missed all this time? I thought we had reached a place of understanding, but now Andrew was telling me there was more. "I don't know if you'll understand," he continued, his voice thick with emotion. "But when you were around, when you were helping me with everything, I started feeling like I wasn't enough. Like I couldn't live up to your expectations. And I started resenting you for it. I started resenting how much you did for me, how much you tried to control everything. I felt small, Dad. I felt like I couldn't breathe." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. "You resented me?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. He nodded, his eyes filled with tears now. "I didn't know how to tell you. I didn't know how to say that I needed you to step back. I needed space to figure things out on my own. I needed to feel like I was capable of handling my own life. And I didn't know how to say it. So I pushed you away. And it wasn't just Rachel influencing me, it was me too. I didn't know how to be your son without feeling like I was failing you." The weight of his words hit me harder than anything else he had said. I sat there, stunned, as everything I had believed about our relationship seemed to shift. Was this what had been festering inside him all these years? Had I unknowingly made him feel this way? I didn't know how to respond at first. I felt guilty. I felt like I had failed him, like I had pushed him into a corner where he couldn't breathe, couldn't live his life the way he needed to. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel anger building inside me. How could he have kept this from me for so long? How could he have let it go this far? "Why didn't you tell me this before, Andrew?" I finally asked, my voice trembling. "Why didn't you say anything? I didn't know you felt this way." "I didn't know how to say it," he said quietly. "I thought if I just kept everything together, it would pass. But it didn't. And then, when Rachel and I started getting closer, I couldn't stand it anymore. I pushed you out because I couldn't deal with the pressure. I couldn't deal with being what I thought you wanted me to be." I sat back in my chair, trying to absorb everything he had just said. There was so much that I hadn't known, so much that had been left unsaid for so long. I had thought that Rachel was the one pushing him away from me, that it was her influence that had caused the rift between us. But now I saw that it was something deeper, something inside Andrew that had been building for years, something I hadn't even noticed. I felt a mixture of emotions, guilt, sadness, frustration, and even anger. But I knew one thing: we couldn't keep going on like this. We couldn't keep avoiding the truth. "Andrew," I said softly, "I don't know what to say. I never wanted you to feel like you were failing me. I never wanted to make you feel like you weren't good enough. You are good enough, you always were. But I was trying to help, trying to be there for you, and maybe I didn't realize how much pressure I was putting on you." He nodded, wiping away a tear. I know you were trying to help, Dad. But I didn't know how to ask for space. I didn't know how to tell you I needed to find my own way." We sat there for a long time in silence. The weight of what we had said hung between us, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like a wall. It felt like the beginning of something new, something we both needed. "I'm sorry, Andrew," I said, my voice steady now. "I'm sorry if I put too much pressure on you. But I'm here for you, always. You don't have to do this alone. I know, Dad, he replied quietly. I know. The conversation with Andrew had opened a floodgate of emotions, and while we had taken steps toward healing, the road ahead was long and fraught with challenges that neither of us had fully anticipated. In the days following our conversation, Andrew and I tried to find our footing again. There was an unspoken understanding between us, an acknowledgement that we couldn't go back to the way things were. The hurt was too deep, the distance too great. But we were willing to rebuild, to try and figure out how to move forward from here. But even with this newfound resolve, the weight of everything that had happened hung heavily in the air. It was as if we were trying to build a house on shaky ground. Every step forward felt like it could be undone with one wrong word, one misstep. And though I desperately wanted to trust that everything would be okay, there was an unspoken tension between us. Every conversation, no matter how casual, seemed to carry the weight of everything that had been left unsaid. We agreed to meet once a week, to give us both time to process things and figure out what we wanted from our relationship. But the more we spoke, the more I began to realize how much had been buried over the years, things that neither of us had addressed, things that had been left unresolved for too long. Andrew's admission about feeling suffocated by me, about feeling like he couldn't live up to my expectations, weighed on me. I kept thinking about it, questioning whether I had been too overbearing in the past, whether I had pushed him too hard to be someone he wasn't. I had always thought I was helping him, trying to guide him, trying to give him a better life than I had, but maybe I hadn't listened to him. Maybe I had been so focused on what I thought he needed that I hadn't seen the silent cries for help, the feelings he had kept hidden for so long. It was a painful realization. I hadn't been the father I thought I was. I had been too wrapped up in my own ideas of what a father should be, what a son should be, and I hadn't allowed Andrew to be himself. I hadn't given him the space to find his own path, to make his own mistakes, and to stand on his own 2 feet. I had tried to shape him into something he wasn't. And I had pushed him away in the process. It wasn't just about Andrew's feelings, though. It was about me too. I realized that, in my quest to be the father I thought he needed, I had lost sight of the father I had wanted to be, one who could listen, one who could accept his son for who he was, one who didn't try to fix everything. I had put so much pressure on him that I had forgotten to show him that I loved him, no matter what he did, no matter what mistakes he made. I had forgotten to be the father who supported him, not the father who demanded perfection. There were nights when I lay awake, replaying everything in my mind, wondering where I had gone wrong, wondering if it was too late to fix things. I wanted to be a better father. I wanted to be the man Andrew needed, not the man I thought he needed. But I didn't know how to change overnight. I didn't know how to undo the damage I had caused. In those quiet moments of self-doubt, I remembered Rachel. She had played a role in all of this, there was no denying it. She had always been polite to me, but there had been an underlying tension from the start. I had always tried to give her space, to respect her boundaries, but in hindsight, I could see how she had subtly pushed me out of their lives. She had influenced Andrew's decisions, played a role in pushing him away from me, but I had allowed it. I had let her control the narrative, let her decide who I was in their lives, and that was something I would regret for a long time. But Rachel wasn't the only one at fault. I had to admit that I had been too focused on my own feelings, too fixated on what I thought was best for Andrew. I hadn't seen the way he was changing, hadn't noticed how much he was hurting, how much he was suffocating under the weight of expectations. And now, I had to face the consequences of that blindness. But it wasn't just Andrew who had changed. I had changed too. I had been forced to take a long, hard look at myself and admit that I wasn't perfect. I had made mistakes. I had hurt the people I loved, even when I thought I was doing the right thing. I had to come to terms with the fact that I couldn't fix everything, that I couldn't control how others felt or what they did. All I could do was listen, learn, and try to be better. As the weeks passed, Andrew and I began to open up more. We talked about everything, about the past, about the present, about the future. But with each conversation, the distance between us grew smaller. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't always pretty. There were moments of tension, moments when the old wounds would reopen, but there was also healing. There were moments when I saw a glimmer of the sun I had lost, and it gave me hope that we could fix this, that we could rebuild our relationship. But then, one day, things took a turn I hadn't expected. I received a call from Andrew. His voice was strained, like he had been holding something in for a long time. "Dad, I need to tell you something," he said, his voice shaking. "I've been talking to Rachel, and I think we need to have another conversation. About everything. About our family." My stomach churned. What did this mean? Was this another step back? Had all the progress we had made been for nothing? "I'm coming over," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "We need to talk." When I arrived at their house, I could tell something was different. The air felt thick with tension, and as soon as Andrew opened the door, I saw it in his eyes. He looked torn, as though he was carrying a burden he wasn't ready to share. Rachel was sitting on the couch, her eyes red as if she had been crying. The moment I saw her, I knew that something was about to change again. "I'm sorry, Dad," Andrew said, his voice cracking. "We've been talking, and we need to come clean about something. It's about me. About us." I sat down, feeling a rush of dread settle over me. What could this possibly be? What had we missed? Andrew and Rachel exchanged a look, and then he spoke again. "There's more to this story, Dad. Things weren't just about you or Rachel. There were things I kept from you, things I never told you. And I need to tell you the truth. I think it's time we all face it." I leaned forward, my heart racing, waiting for the truth to unfold. What had we been hiding? What had been left unsaid for all these years? The truth was a heavy burden, and when it came out, it was nothing like what I had expected. But maybe, just maybe, this was the final test we needed to rebuild, or perhaps it was the breaking point I never saw coming. I sat there, feeling the weight of Andrew's words hanging in the air, thick with anticipation. Rachel sat beside him, her face pale, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. It was clear they had been holding something back, something they thought I wasn't ready to hear, but whatever it was, it had been building up for a long time. Andrew cleared his throat. "Dad, I've been carrying this around for a while. And I think, honestly, it's time I told you the full story. About what really happened when I pushed you away." I sat still, my heart hammering in my chest. This wasn't a simple apology. I knew that now. The air felt heavy, like it was pressing down on me, making it hard to breathe. What could be so important, so damaging, that they hadn't said anything until now? "I wasn't just angry at you," Andrew continued, his voice steady but full of regret. "It wasn't just that I was overwhelmed or felt like I was failing. That was part of it, yes. But there's more, Dad. I think you deserve to know the full truth. I need you to understand everything." I nodded slowly, urging him to continue, even though I wasn't sure I was prepared for whatever was coming next. "It's about Rachel and me," Andrew said, glancing over at her. She nodded, though her face was filled with concern, as if she were bracing herself for what would come next. Rachel spoke softly, her voice tinged with guilt. "I didn't tell you everything either, David. There's something we've been hiding from you for a long time." The air seemed to thicken with every word they spoke, and I could feel a lump forming in my throat. Whatever it was something that had been kept from me. Something that, once revealed, could change everything. "I'm listening," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I had to hear them out, no matter how painful it was. Andrew took a deep breath and then let the words spill out. "The thing is, Dad, when Rachel and I first got married, I was struggling with something I didn't know how to talk about. I was dealing with a lot of insecurities about myself. I had a hard time accepting the person I was, and I projected all of that onto you. You were the one person I thought I could measure myself against. I felt like I was always in your shadow, like I could never live up to what you'd done." My heart dropped as he continued, and I could feel the weight of his words pressing down on me. For so long, I had assumed that Andrew's distance was just about his own struggles, about becoming a man, a father. But this was something deeper, something more painful. "I never told you this, Dad," Andrew said quietly, "but I always felt like you expected more from me. Like I wasn't enough. I've been holding on to that feeling for years, trying to prove to myself and to you that I could be the son you wanted me to be. But in the process, I pushed you away. I shut myself off from you. I made you feel like you weren't needed." The sting of his words was sharp, like a slap to the face. I had always tried to be the best father I could be, to support him, to give him everything I never had. But I never realized that, in doing so, I had placed a burden on him, a burden that had only made him feel smaller and more inadequate. I had never seen it from his perspective. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. "Andrew. I had no idea. I didn't realize you felt like that. I never wanted you to feel like you weren't enough. You were always more than enough to me." Andrew's face twisted with emotion, and he rubbed his eyes, as if trying to hold back tears. "That's the thing, Dad. I know you think that, but I couldn't see it. I thought you were disappointed in me. I thought I wasn't good enough for you, that I would never be able to measure up. And that made me resent you. I resented you for always trying to help, always trying to fix things. I didn't realize that you were just trying to love me. I couldn't see that. And now," he paused, his voice thick with regret. "Now I know I was wrong. But it's too late. I can't undo the things I've said, the way I've treated you." I sat in stunned silence, absorbing everything he had just said. I felt like I was seeing my son for the first time, not the angry, resentful man who had shut me out, but the vulnerable, confused boy I had raised. And then, Rachel spoke again, her voice low and hesitant. "David, there's more to it. After Andrew started feeling like this, I got scared. I thought that if I didn't support him, if I didn't protect him from the pressure of being your son, then I might lose him. And I pushed him to cut ties with you. I thought that would make things easier for him, that it would help him find his own way." Her words hit me like a wave. I had always known that Rachel had some influence on Andrew, but hearing it from her own lips was a bitter pill to swallow. She hadn't just been passive in all of this, she had actively encouraged Andrew to distance himself from me, to shut me out completely. "I see now that I was wrong," Rachel continued, her voice trembling. "I thought I was helping him. I thought I was protecting him. But I was just making things worse. I should have told you. I should have been honest with you." For a moment, there was nothing but silence in the room. The truth had been laid bare, and I felt like I was standing in the ruins of everything I had known. I had spent so many years trying to be a good father, trying to give Andrew the best life I could, only to find out that my efforts had pushed him away. But even in the midst of this devastating revelation, I felt a flicker of understanding. The truth was painful, but it was also freeing. At least now I knew what had happened. At least now I understood why Andrew had distanced himself from me, why Rachel had acted the way she did. "Andrew," I said softly, my voice shaking, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel like you weren't enough. I just wanted to help. I never realized that I was causing you pain. I thought I was doing what was best for you." Andrew looked up at me, his eyes filled with regret. "I know, Dad. And I'm sorry too. I'm sorry for pushing you away, for making you feel like you weren't needed. You've always been there for me. I see that now. I just didn't know how to accept it." I took a deep breath, my heart still heavy with the weight of everything we had just uncovered. "We can't change the past, Andrew. But we can move forward. Together. I'm not going anywhere, and neither are you. We're family. It wasn't the perfect resolution. There were still so many things we needed to work through. So many years of hurt, so much lost time. But in that moment, I realized that this was the beginning of something new. A new chapter in our relationship, one where we could finally be honest with each other, where we could finally heal. The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more conversations, more healing, more time needed to rebuild the trust we had lost. But we had finally faced the truth. And that was the first step.